Yes, our guest this morning is Officer James Smallwood. He is the president of the Fraternal Order of Police here in Davidson County, and got a few phone calls. We'll go to David. David, good morning. Hi, David.
Hey, good morning, Nick. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I have a statement and a question for your panelists. First of all, I support the police department wholly, fully, and I appreciate their efforts. That's my statement. Secondly, I would ask Mr. Smallwood if what protocols are in place to allow the police officers the opportunity for self-care. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Self-care. Do you need him to clarify? You know what he's referring to?
I think I know
thank you
what
for your call, David. I appreciate it. Self-care. What would that be?
So, you know, over the last decade, I think we've really started to place an important focus on officer wellness, because the reality is police officers go in and they do a difficult job day in and day out, and they see things that can never be unseen.
He's talking mental health.
I believe so,
okay.
Yeah. And I will say that Nashville and Davidson County, the MNPD, has a phenomenal mental health or behavioral health wellness
counseling.
Unit. They provide counseling. There's a whole host of things. There's peer supporters. So if you're struggling with something, there's somebody to talk to. There's somebody to help you guide through that. And it's not just what you see on the police department or what you may have to do or not do one day. It's things that people are struggling with day in and day out, whether it be family or financial or whatever. On the other side of that, the FOP provides financial training and wellness training. The FOP is on the forefront of the topic of wellness. We've established our own wellness unit, and we're driving that from not only a local but a national standpoint. So there are various different opportunities for officers to try and mitigate any issues that they may be having. That being said, we've talked about this in this show several times. Staffing is a big deal. Mm-hmm. And when you are being brought in to work 5, 6, 7 days a week at 10, 12, 14-hour shifts, that can be very taxing on somebody's mental well-being. So that's why it's so important that we start to focus on increasing staffing so we have adequate levels and that officers can get a proper amount of time to decompress.
They need rest.
Yeah.
Well, let's take another call. We've got one from Timmy, I believe. Are you there, Timmy?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead, sir.
I'd like to know what this was all about. 9 cops shoot one guy down with a box cutter. One of the cops even walked up and shot him twice once he was down.
Do you want? This is one we touched on, right?
Yeah. So
the video that you hit on it a bit. It did look, just from the outside, and again, context is everything, but it almost looked like a firing squad.
Yeah, look, there are some tactical errors made in that. There's no question. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to put something like that together on an interstate. First of all, you've got traffic that you've got to mitigate, so on and so forth. Certainly, it didn't look the best.
Okay.
That being said, the gentleman's right. The officer or the individual had a box cutter, and the officers on scene spent probably 45 minutes trying to tell him, please put that down.
Did they know what it was? At the time, I
don't think they knew at the time.
Because when he pulled something out, they didn't know, or they thought the way he was moving and pointing, it could have been a weapon. Right?
No,
how do you say?
He pulls the box cutter out, and my understanding is the officers on scene, the troopers on scene first, knew that was a box cutter.
Okay.
They created some distance, then they started to negotiate with the guy, please put it down, so on and so forth. Later on, if you watch the video, this guy has been walking around with his hand in his pocket. He's not making a whole lot of sense. He's not looking like he's making good decisions. Clearly, we've found ourselves at an impasse. And then he draws something from his pocket. It's a shiny object, and he takes a firing stance at the officers. And that's what forced the officers to respond the way they did. So I think again, this is why context is so important with content. People can get half of the information, draw an erroneous conclusion, and make the decision that everybody out there was wrong. When you pull something out of your pocket facing a police officer, it's a shiny object, and that officer doesn't know what it is, and you make a firing stance, there's only one response that we're going to have. And as for the later shots, when you watch that video, you can see, before those 2 late shots come in, a hand come up. It looks like he is getting ready to pull that shiny object back up, and there are officers standing there in the open that could be potential targets. So that officer from a distance sees that, because he's hyper-focused on the individual, sees the arm come up. He takes those 2 shots, the arm comes down, that's the end of the incident. That's why context is so important. Nobody knows that. Nobody has really paid attention and broken down the video and gone, look, you can see the arm come back up. You can see him with that shiny object in his hand coming back up and pointing it at the officers that are standing there. That's why that officer did what he did. And that's why everybody has come out and said this was justified, because it took them, what, 9 months to go through the facts of the case, to look at this and go, okay, yeah, we're looking at this, rather than taking a 10-second video and going, oh, well, the officers were wrong. They went through every little detail, and they dissected the entire incident and went, looks like the officers did everything they could to mitigate this. Were there some tactical errors? Certainly.
And the tactical errors, and I hear what you're saying, so it was reviewed, and I think if you do, you kind of see the point you're making, but what would some of those have been early on that maybe could have been different? And keeping in mind, again, a lot of people say, why not just back off and leave them? Well, you're on the side of an interstate. This is not some grassy field somewhere where there's cars coming by, you could wander in. I mean, that was a danger, but what tactically maybe did you learn from this?
I think the officers probably learned that there could have been more cover, more tactical positioning. But again, it is super easy to Monday morning quarterback this entire incident. Right. When you've got cars flying by you at 70 miles an hour, remembering that the first two troopers that encountered this guy rolled up to give him a ride off the interstate, said, hey, bud, you can't be on the interstate. Can we get you off? Can we give you a ride off the interstate? And his response was, yeah, it wasn't get me off the interstate. It was to pull a box cutter out and be confrontational. So now you've got two troopers with one individual who's confrontational with a lethal weapon. The rule for knives and sharp edged weapons is 21 feet. If you're within 21 feet, you're in the danger zone, because that edged weapon can hit you really fast before you can react. So they're within that 21-foot rule. They're right there on top of this guy. He's pulled a knife out. You got cars behind you going 70 miles an hour. They're doing everything they can to try and slow this down, get people stopped on the interstate. Now you've got to manage the traffic on the interstate. You got people, they're getting on the radio saying, we need help. THP isn't tied in with Metro, so there's a delay there. So once Metro gets the word, they're coming as fast as they can. This is an involving incident, and we while it's easy to be critical 9 months, 10 months later, we have to look at the facts of the case. We have to dissect every certain part of the incident so that we can go, was this done right? Can we learn from this? And we've already talked about how we can learn from it. But did the officers do everything they could to avoid having to shoot the guy? In my opinion and perspective, if you've spent 45 minutes with a guy negotiating with him, begging and pleading with him, please put the knife down, we don't want to do this, you've done everything you can. And when that individual pulls a shiny object, takes a firing stance, points it at officers, there's not really something else that we can do.
Talking about dissecting a case, just as we wrap up the show, story came out just in the past week updating the Andrew Delkey, Daniel Hambrick case, and it was reported, or reminding folks, I guess, that he is scheduled to be released. Andrew Delkey, who shot and killed Daniel Hambrick from jail in December. And some reports that he's getting out early. I reported initially that this was always part of the deal, that when this worked out, and there was a plea deal worked out with the DA's office, that he would get out, if not by Thanksgiving, before Christmas 2022. So no surprise to me, and I think we reported, I'm just updating, he'll be getting out as was expected. But there's not a change here. You want to comment a bit on that, as people may be thinking, wait a second, is this a police officer getting a break because he gets out early?
No, listen, it's easy again to hype up the content of this without knowing the context, and you've hit on that. Officer Delkey made a decision in court because he felt like he wasn't getting a fair deal in trial, and he took a plea deal. And that plea deal was agreed upon by everybody that's involved. The district attorney.
Except for Daniel Hambrick's family.
Well, except for Daniel Hambrick's family, and we saw the evolution of that in the courtroom. But the district attorney, the defense attorneys, and the individual that was involved as the defendant made a decision to take a plea deal. And that plea deal had certain outline parameters. And he's not getting a different deal than any other citizen in Davidson County would get. He's not being treated differently than any other person in Davidson County would be treated. So I think it's important to remember that. And matter of fact, we've had a law enforcement officer who was killed in the line of duty, who just a couple weeks ago, the individual that fled police in a felony flight and ran into that police officer and killed that police officer was released on a similar deal and got out what is considered early. So if you're going to be outraged about this, you have to be outraged about the criminal justice system as a whole, because he's not being treated any differently than anyone is.
Yeah, so it's time served, the credits that are made, and just it was reported at the time, everyone knew this was the deal. He'd do about 15 months.
Yeah.
So it's not a surprise. It's not like all of a sudden, wait a second, this is what I reported at the time. That was the deal. David Rabin said so. The DA said so. It's not a surprise coming now. If you're reporting it now, you're just updating the fact that, yeah, he will be getting out in December.
Yeah. It was no secret when it happened, and it seems like now people are bringing it up. I don't know what the purpose is other than just to try and get people excited about it again, and there's no reason for that.
By the way, just wrapping things up, do you ever have any contact with him, or do you have any sense of what, he's no longer a police officer, what he'll do? I know he resigned.
I've not had any contact with Officer Delkey or Andrew Delkey since he's taken that deal, and I don't know what his plans are for the future.
Okay, as we wrap things up, I guess you would say, in terms of becoming a police officer, there are help wanted signs up right here in Metro.
Absolutely.
And
join
you encourage
MPD.com.
people that are interested in that to apply.
Yeah, we need all the help we can get, and we need good men and women to step up and do this job. Like you've said already, it's a dangerous job, but it's also one of the most fulfilling jobs that you'll ever have. So please come join us. We need you.
Yeah, 212 officers short as it stands right now. When you say short, meaning that's what you need to be up to capacity to do the job as best you can without having to work a ton of overtime.
We need 212 officers to be fully staffed as we're budgeted. We need truly about 712 officers.
Yeah.
Given all the special events, the demands, the explosive growth in Nashville, the police department has to catch up with that.
Yeah,
we haven't done it yet.
We had some of your guys out there, I'm sure, yesterday over there on Broad for Tootsie's birthday party. You
Every
guys
event on Broadway.
All those events.
Yep.
And you think of so many huge events that Nashville draws, from the NFL draft and, you know, when the hockey team's in the Stanley Cup, I mean, the crowds and all of that. I mean, how many, you know, events need to be staffed by police officers?
That all requires a police response and presence. So we need your help.
James Smallwood, thank you for coming on.
Thank you,
Really
sir.
appreciate you coming on for the conversation. Maybe we'll talk again. It's always good to lay some of these issues out, and I appreciate our viewers joining in on this. We'll see you again soon, my friend.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. We'll take a break. We'll be back. Programming note about tomorrow right after this. Stay with us.